January 21st, 1968. Khe Sanh Combat Base, northwestern South Vietnam. The first artillery round lands before dawn. It doesn't sound like an explosion at first, more like the sky tearing open. The ground lifts, drops, then shakes again as a second shell slams into the perimeter wire. Red dust pours from the ceiling of the bunker, drifting down onto helmets, rifles, faces already hollow from weeks without real sleep. You're a Marine here. Maybe a rifleman from 226, maybe a machine gunner from 19. It doesn't matter. Everyone at Khe Sanh learns the same lesson fast. There is no safe direction. The plateau sits at 1,500 feet, a flat scar carved into jungle and hills near the Laotian border. Whoever controls the ridges controls everything, and the ridges are gone. North Vietnamese artillery, 122mm rockets, 152mm guns, mortars dug deep into limestone, has the base registered down to individual bunkers. They don't need to see you. They already know where you are. Another shell hits the ammo dump. For a second, the world turns white, then orange, then black. A shockwave rolls through the base, flipping trucks, shredding sandbags, tearing bodies apart. Secondary explosions ripple outward as stored rounds cook off. Marines dive into trenches already half full of mud and blood, pressing their faces into the earth as steel fragments scream overhead. This is day 1. By February, it will feel like day 40. Inside the bunkers, men sit with their backs against rotting timber, rifles across their knees, counting seconds between impacts. Some whisper prayers. Others don't speak at all. Every sound could be the one that ends it, the whistle of incoming, the crack of a sniper round, the dull thud that means the shell landed close enough. The base smells like cordite, wet clay, and unwashed bodies. Rain falls constantly, turning trenches into brown rivers. Rats the size of cats crawl over sleeping Marines, feeding on scraps, and sometimes on the dead before they can be evacuated. Snipers are everywhere. A Marine steps out of a bunker to piss and drops instantly, a single 7.62 round punching through his helmet. Medics crawl to him under fire, dragging bodies back by web gear, hands slick with rain and gore. By mid-February, the numbers are clear. Roughly 6,000 U.S. Marines and Navy personnel hold Khe Sanh. Surrounding them, at least 20,000 North Vietnamese Army troops. Some estimates push it closer to 30,000. 3 divisions. Veterans of Dien Bien Phu. Men who know how to bleed an enemy dry. They dig closer every night. Listening posts vanish. Patrols walk into ambushes so precise it feels like the jungle itself is pulling the trigger. Marines hear shovels scraping underground, tunnels creeping toward the wire. Claymores are set, trip flares wired. Fingers stay tight on triggers. And yet, something is wrong. The Marines expect human wave attacks. They expect bugles, whistles, massed infantry charges crashing into the wire under covering fire. That's what the intelligence briefings promised. That's what history says should happen. But it doesn't. Instead, the shelling never stops. Day, night, dawn, dusk. The base is pounded methodically, surgically. Bunkers are collapsed one by one. Runways cratered faster than engineers can repair them. C-130s and C-123s dive through flak and cloud to drop supplies, sometimes landing, sometimes just kicking pallets into the sky and hoping parachutes open. Sometimes they don't. Supplies smash into the ground, exploding or scattering into no man's land. Marines sprint under fire to recover them, knowing every movement is watched. Every man at Khe Sanh feels it, the sense of being studied. Why haven't they attacked? Why pour this much fire into a base they could overrun? Colonel David Lowndes, the base commander, studies maps in a bunker lit by flickering bulbs. He knows the enemy is capable. He knows the odds are insane. And he knows something else, too. This siege feels deliberate, like pressure without release, like bait left out in the open. Above them, American air power roars non-stop. B-52s carpet the jungle beyond the wire, detonations so massive Marines feel them in their chests even from miles away. They call it arc light. The ground rises in waves, trees vanish, hillsides collapse, and still the shelling continues. The Marines joke darkly that Khe Sanh is cursed, that the plateau wants blood, that nobody leaves the same way they arrived, if they leave at all. What they don't know yet is that this place isn't meant to be the killing ground. It's meant to be the distraction. While 6,000 men stare into the jungle, waiting for an assault that never comes, something far larger is already moving, quietly, invisibly, toward the heart of South Vietnam. By late February, time at Khe Sanh no longer moves forward. It compresses. Days blur into a single endless moment between impacts. Marines stop counting the calendar and start counting artillery patterns. Short rounds mean adjustment. Long pauses mean something worse is coming. Sleep happens in fragments, 3 minutes here, 5 there, interrupted by explosions that feel personal, like they were aimed at your chest alone. Men dream sitting upright, helmets still on, fingers locked around rifle grips. Some wake screaming. Some don't wake at all. The North Vietnamese tighten the noose. Their trenches creep closer every night, spiderwebbing through the jungle, hidden by foliage and rain. From the wire, Marines can sometimes hear voices, low, calm, confident, only yards away. They throw grenades blindly into the darkness. The jungle answers with silence. Then a sniper fires. Corporal John Gronowski steps into daylight to repair concertina wire and drops instantly, his body folding without a sound. A second Marine rushes to him and takes a round through the shoulder. A third crawls back, dragging both men, teeth clenched so hard blood runs from his gums. No medals for this, no cameras, just survival measured in minutes. Food arrives cold, soaked, sometimes spoiled. Water tastes of metal and dust. Dysentery spreads. Trench foot rots, flesh from bone. Marines cut away boots to free swollen feet, then tape them back on because there is nowhere else to go. Above it all, the air war never stops. F-4 Phantoms scream in low-dropping napalm so close the heat singes eyebrows inside bunkers. A-4. Skyhawks punch through clouds to plaster ridgelines with bombs. B-52 strikes are called in so close the safety margins shrink to nothing. Pilots warn, danger close. Ground controllers answer, send it. The jungle disappears in pillars of fire. And yet the artillery keeps coming. The North Vietnamese have learned. They shoot, displace, vanish. Their guns survive, their pressure remains constant. Marines start recognizing individual enemy pieces by sound. That's the 152 again. That's the mortar from Hill 881. They name the hills because the hills are killing them. Hill 881 South, Hill 861, Hill 950. Each is a mouth pouring death downhill. Patrols sent out to silence them don't come back whole, some don't come back at all. A platoon pushes into the fog and is swallowed by machine gun fire so precise it feels rehearsed. Survivors crawl back missing men, missing fingers, missing pieces of themselves. Still no assault. That's what breaks them. The waiting. If the enemy attacked, there would be purpose. Targets, sectors, orders screamed into radios. But this is something else. This is psychological suffocation. Marines begin to believe Khe Sanh is meant to die slowly. Rumors spread through the trenches that Washington wants another Dien Bien Phu to prove Americans won't run, that the generals are willing to sacrifice everyone here for symbolism, that the NVA is just waiting for the base to starve. Colonel Lowndes walks the perimeter daily, exposed, refusing a helmet at times. He talks to his men, looks them in the eyes. He doesn't promise rescue. He promises resistance. Inside command bunkers, intelligence officers stare at intercepted communications and aerial photographs that don't quite make sense. There are too many NVA units here, too much artillery, too much attention. If Khe Sanh falls, it's a propaganda victory. If it holds, it bleeds American resources dry. Either way, the enemy wins. Unless Khe Sanh isn't the objective at all. Late at night, Marines hear distant thunder, not artillery, not airstrikes, something deeper. Rolling. Massive. Like a storm moving across the land. Hundreds of miles away, North Vietnamese units are already infiltrating cities, villages, bases, dressed as civilians, carrying weapons and pieces, moving through routes the Americans think are quiet. Khe Sanh is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It has frozen American attention. Every bomber, every shell, every eye is focused here, on this plateau soaked in mud and blood. And while 6,000 Marines wait for death that never comes, the real blow is lining up somewhere no one is watching. February 30th never arrives at Khe Sanh, but the night feels like it should. The shelling pauses, not slows, stops. For the first time in weeks, there is silence so complete it feels artificial, like the world has been unplugged. Marines freeze in place, fingers tightening on triggers. No one speaks. No one moves. Silence at Khe Sanh never means safety. Flares hiss into the sky, bathing the wire in harsh white light. Nothing moves. Minutes stretch. Sweat runs cold down spines. Every man is certain this is it, the final assault, the human wave, the end. Then the radios crackle, not from the wire, from everywhere else. Reports flood in from across South Vietnam, fragmented, panicked, unbelievable. Saigon under attack, Hue under attack, Da Nang, Pleiku, Kontum hit simultaneously. Viet Cong units erupt from safe houses, tunnels, pagodas. North Vietnamese regulars pour into cities the Americans believe secure. U.S. embassies, airfields, command centers, targets chosen not for territory, but for shock. This is Tet, and suddenly Khe Sanh makes sense. The enemy never intended to storm the plateau, not yet. The siege was theater, a masterfully staged fixation that dragged American divisions, aircraft, and attention to the far northwest corner of the country while the real war moved elsewhere. At Khe Sanh, the shelling resumes, but now it feels different, almost perfunctory. The pressure remains, but the purpose has shifted. The Marines are no longer the center of gravity. They are the pin holding the board in place. In the trenches, men listen to radio broadcasts describing firefights in streets that days ago were considered safe enough for coffee shops and patrols without helmets. The war has changed shape overnight. Some Marines feel relief, others feel rage. They were never meant to die here. They were meant to wait, and waiting has a cost. The siege grinds on into March. Supplies come in by parachute, sometimes under such heavy fire pilots can't land. A Marine watches a pallet smash into the mud and explode, ammo cooking off in a bloom of fire. Another sprints through shell fire to recover medical crates, dragging them back one by one, knowing every step is watched. Casualties climb. Bunkers collapse under direct hits. Men are buried alive, clawing at mud until hands break through or voices go silent. Corpsmen work until their hands cramp, until morphine runs out, until they can't remember faces anymore. Above it all, American command debates the unthinkable. What if Khe Sanh falls? What if this becomes the Dien Bien Phu of the American war? So they unleash everything. Operation Niagara turns the area around Khe Sanh into one of the most heavily bombed places on Earth. Sensors dropped from the air detect movement. Computers plot strikes. Bombs fall on coordinates fed by machines listening to footsteps in the jungle. The ground is pulverized, and still, the North Vietnamese do not charge. They endure, because they don't need Khe Sanh to fall. They need it to exist. By late March, the pressure begins to ease, not because the enemy is defeated, but because their objective has been achieved. The Tet Offensive has shattered the illusion of control. The war has entered a new phase, one no amount of bombing can rewind. When relief finally comes, it doesn't feel like victory. Operation Pegasus breaks through to Khe Sanh, columns of Marines and armor pushing up Route 9 under fire. They reach the base to find men who look older than their years, eyes hollow, movements slow and deliberate. The siege ends, but the base remains for a few more months. Then quietly, almost shamefully, Khe Sanh is abandoned, bunkers filled in, equipment destroyed, the plateau left to the jungle that drank so much blood to claim it. The creepiest part isn't the shelling, or the snipers, or the waiting. It's the realization that 6,000 Marines survived one of the deadliest sieges of the war, not because they were meant to win there, but because they were never meant to be the battlefield at all. July 1968, Khe Sanh Combat Base. There is no siege anymore, only emptiness. Where bunkers once shook under direct hits, there are collapsed roofs and rotting timber. Trenches that once held crouching Marines now fill with rainwater, frogs, and drifting debris. Rusted shell casings crunch under boots. The air smells cleaner than it should, like the land itself is trying to forget. The evacuation happens without ceremony, no speeches, no victory formation. Just orders passed quietly. Destroy what you can't carry. Bulldozers push ammunition into pits. Engineers rig bunkers with explosives. Radios crackle one last time, then go silent. The plateau that absorbed 40 days of fear is handed back to the jungle. Marines walk away without looking back. Some feel anger, others feel nothing at all. A few feel shame, not for losing, but for surviving something that now seems pointless. Khe Sanh didn't fall. It didn't hold either. It simply expired. Later historians will argue over what it meant. Was it a strategic success? A diversion that worked exactly as planned? Or a grotesque gamble that burned lives for symbolism and misdirection? For the men who lived there, the answers don't matter. They remember the waiting. They remember lying in mud while artillery turned night into day. They remember listening for footsteps that never came. They remember wondering which would arrive first, the final assault or the shell with their name on it. Some carry shrapnel for the rest of their lives. Some carry the silence. Years later, veterans return to Khe Sanh. The jungle has reclaimed almost everything. Bomb craters soften into ponds. Hills grow green again. The plateau looks peaceful, unnervingly so. And that's what makes it unsettling. Nothing marks where friends died. Nothing shows where bunkers collapsed or where men waited weeks to be overrun and never were. Khe Sanh doesn't feel like a battlefield. It feels like a trap that was sprung elsewhere. Because the creepiest death trap of the Vietnam War wasn't the place where thousands died in one night. It was the place where thousands waited to die and were spared, not by mercy, but by irrelevance. July 1968, Khe Sanh Combat Base, northwestern South Vietnam. The helicopters come without drama, no victory banners, no cheering crowds, just rotors chopping humid air as Marines file aboard in small groups, rifles slung low, eyes scanning the ridgelines out of habit they can't turn off. Some still flinch at loud sounds. Some still sleep in 10-minute cycles. The siege is over, but it hasn't let go. Below them, Khe Sanh looks wounded. The runway is scarred with patched craters. Bunkers are half collapsed, their timbers splintered like broken ribs. Trenches sag inward, filled with rainwater and debris. Empty sandbags rot into the mud. Bent rebar sticks up from the ground like grave markers that never got names. Before leaving, the Marines destroy what remains. Explosives ripple through abandoned positions. Radios are smashed. Fuel is burned. Ammunition pits are detonated in controlled blasts that echo across the plateau. One last imitation of the shelling that ruled their lives for 40 days. No one watches. They've all learned what explosions mean here. As the last helicopters lift off, Khe Sanh disappears beneath cloud and jungle haze. The plateau returns to silence so complete it feels unnatural, like the pause after a gunshot before pain arrives. Later, headquarters will call it a redeployment. Strategists will argue that the base was no longer necessary, that the mission had changed, that Khe Sanh had served its purpose. But among the men who lived there, another word spreads quietly: abandoned. Months earlier, they were told Khe Sanh mattered, that it was vital, that it could not fall, that everything depended on holding this plateau. Now it is erased. The creepiest part isn't that Khe Sanh was evacuated, it's how easily it was forgotten. Years pass. The war drags on, then ends. Photographs fade. Headlines move on. But Khe Sanh doesn't vanish from the men who were there. It returns in fragments, artillery thunder during thunderstorms, the smell of wet earth after rain, the sudden certainty that something terrible is about to happen even when nothing does. Some veterans come back. They walk the plateau in silence, guided by memory rather than maps. The jungle has swallowed almost everything. Where bunkers once stood, there are vines and trees. Bomb craters have softened into ponds. Birds nest where machine guns once fired. It looks peaceful. That's what unsettles them. There are no signs marking where friends were buried alive by collapsing bunkers. No plaques where snipers took men mid-step. No memorials for the weeks spent waiting for an assault that never came. Khe Sanh doesn't feel like a battlefield. It feels like a place that was used. Historians will later confirm what the Marines sensed in their bones. Khe Sanh was never meant to be taken. It was meant to hold American attention, fix U.S. forces, aircraft, and commanders in one remote corner of Vietnam while the real blow fell elsewhere. While Marines stared into the jungle expecting death, North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces were already moving through cities, preparing on the Tet Offensive that would fracture American confidence and reshape the war. Khe Sanh didn't need to fall. It only needed to exist. That is why no final assault came. That is why the waiting was worse than the fighting. The Marines survived not because they were spared, but because they were strategically expendable once their role was complete. The creepiest death trap of the Vietnam War wasn't a massacre or a last stand. It was a place where thousands of men waited to be annihilated, only to realize, much later, that their survival was never the point. The plateau still sits there today, quiet, overgrown, unmarked. And if you stand on it long enough, listening to the wind move through the trees, you can almost imagine the shelling starting again. Because some places don't forget. They just wait.